gallery. Yeah.
Cool. So now it says live on Facebook.
Good to go. Dr. Alex
All right.
Vasquez. So such a pleasure to have you, man.
Likewise.
Yeah, we've been in each other's lives for a while. I discovered you. I mean, you were the first doctor that I started following after my injury, and and you have been sort of an unofficial mentor to me for for a very long time, and I'm so appreciative of you and really excited to have you, on actually connect and interview finally.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your invitation. I know that you and I have tried to contact each other, back and forth a couple of times over the years, but like we were just saying, I've moved around a lot and just stayed obviously very busy. So
Yeah, right now you are in Spain, right? That's where you live.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm in protective custody right now.
Not a bad place to be. Who's holding you hostage?
Well, right now, the entire global control system, it would appear, because as you know, in my opinion of this is that this is not simply a medical issue that's happening right now. It's obviously got some political components to it. So,
right.
But anyway, we may or may not talk more about that. But why don't we talk about like the history you were just asking me about, the book and all the stuff that happened this past week, for example.
Yeah, I will. All right. First of all, Dr. Vasquez is a doctor of osteopathic medicine, a doctor of naturopathic medicine, and a doctor of chiropractic medicine. He's written over 200 articles in peer-reviewed journals and written, 25 textbooks now? And
yeah, probably 35.
35 at this point.
Depends on how you do the math, but yeah, a lot.
So Dr. Vasquez is one of the most prolific humans I know, and extremely accomplished. And I wanted to get him on to talk about, the COVID-19 situation that we have going on right now, and get some perspective on what it's looking like from his very educated standpoint. So first of all, I want to ask you, what is a virus?
So viruses are they're obviously tiny little structures, right? They're smaller than cells. They're smaller than bacteria. And typically, I think of viruses as having three components. You've got the genetic material, obviously. So viruses are basically just little capsules of genetic material. They don't really have the machinery that a mammalian cell would have. Like, they don't have mitochondria, and they don't have a lot of mechanisms. They really just have their genetic material, and they have the ability, and maybe sometimes they have some enzymes kind of enclosed within them, but they're mostly genetic material, maybe with a few enzymes. So you got genetic material, you've got some type of capsule, often it's called a capsid, that surrounds the genetic material. And the third part that I think is important to understand about viruses is that they always have some type of structure on the outside, and that functions as kind of a key or a receptor or some way to attach to cells and then enter into them. So viruses can really only function once they've entered into another cell, whether it's a plant or a mammal or a cat or a dog or a human. So they have to enter in, and they can't just walk into any cell. They have to attach, and then some type of molecule has to fit onto the host cell, and then that's how the viruses enter. So it's kind of like the lock and key model or receptor model. So again, genetic material surrounded by a capsule or a capsid is the proper name, and then some type of structure on the outside that allows them to hook on to whatever cell they're trying to enter into. In the case of this coronavirus that we're dealing with in 2020, it has what's called a spike protein on the outside. And that's how these cells attach and then enter into human cells. The spike protein attaches onto a receptor. Probably more than one receptor can receive that spike protein, but the one that gets the most conversation is called ACE2. So that's basically how viruses function. And that's how they enter into cells, and then they hijack the internal machinery of the cell because, like I said, viruses don't have their own machinery. They have to use the machinery of whatever the host is.
Mm-hmm.
So they enter into the cell, and then they basically take over. It's kind of like a coup d'etat or a dictatorship of the cell. And then they say, if we're going to imagine a virus speaking, it announces to the cell, I'm taking over, and you're going to do my work for me, and you're going to reproduce me tens of thousands of times until you die. And then the cell usually explodes and releases all these virus particles. And that's how viruses are said to perpetuate themselves.
Gotcha. So it's basically a hijack situation of yourself, and then proliferation.
Kind of like you could think of it kind of like a carjacking, like, you've got your human cell doing its job, whatever that is, and then it gets hijacked or carjacked by this virus, and then the virus says, I'm taking over, and you're going to do what I want. So at least that's how it works for a while.
Okay.
That's a pretty good analogy, and then your immune system is the police, and your immune system has to come and, kill the hijacked, basically blow up the hijacked car. That usually kills the human cell as well, but that doesn't matter too much unless it's like a brain cell. Then that obviously does matter.
Right.
But most of the other cells can regenerate themselves.
Okay. So you wrote a book called Antiviral Nutrition.
Right.
Tell me how that came to be.
Well, obviously I didn't just like wake up one day and write that book. I had studied, I'll try to give you the short story, but I'll try to make it complete. When I was in chiropractic college, starting back in the early 90s, we had a basic microbiology followed by clinical microbiology, followed by public health, and then pathology. So I was somewhat fortunate for my first year and a half of chiropractic college that we had a lot of study in microbiology. And, a lot of students just ignored it because they said, well, all I'm going to do is, do musculoskeletal care. But I always studied everything to the maximum that I could, So like when I was a chiropractic student studying microbiology, I studied as much as I could. I wanted to understand the stuff. So, my experience was obviously different from probably the experience of most of my classmates. After I graduated chiropractic college, I went straight into naturopathic medical school. And there I took clinical microbiology, and we had a great teacher for clinical microbiology. And then we had another class in immunology. So I got another dose of microbiology and immunology, which was really good because, naturopaths are really focused in on treating infectious diseases and immune disorders. So our study in naturopathic college of microbiology and laboratory medicine and immunology was quite detailed. So then I practiced for 6 years, 7 years, then I went to osteopathic medical school and then got everything, once again. So, obviously I had studied, microbiology at this point several times, and I had studied it quite a bit on my own. In 2009, I published a book called Chiropractic and Naturopathic Mastery of Common Clinical Disorders. And in that book, I talked about treating viral infections for the first time in my work, which had previously focused on orthopedics and rheumatology. So in that book, I started to organize kind of a treatment strategy for virus infections. That was, again, in 2009. I didn't touch that work again until 2014, which is when the Ebola crisis was going crazy all over the place. So at that time, and with Ebola and acute flaccid paralysis and measles and all the news about all these viral infections, I felt a need to kind of address those concerns by telling the other side of the story, which was never being told at that time. The side of the story that wasn't being told at that time is, obviously the impact that nutrition can have on the prevention of these diseases and the treatment of these diseases. And you'll notice, by the way, that that hasn't changed. In all of the conversation that you see these days about coronavirus and influenza, you never see the official conversation include nutrition, right? Like no one's saying on the news, oh, well, make sure you take your multivitamin supplement. Even if it's a low dose supplement, they should still recommend something. And they're not doing that at all. And for me, that's a big reveal. The fact that you're supposed to do everything to take care of yourself and to take care of your neighbors and your community, and you're supposed to shoulder responsibility for this. but not to the point where you would actually take a nutritional supplement, right? That's completely out of the conversation. Mm-hmm. And that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous, and it's irresponsible. But it also tells you who's guiding the conversation. Well, you know,
before we go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, I was just gonna make something up real quick. So here it comes. And I was going to use a car metaphor, and the car is about to drive by. Hold on. Let's wait for this motor to drive by. I don't know if you can hear it, but he's right in front of my house. That's a good metaphor.
They must pass, right?
Right. So let's say, I'll just go with the metaphor that I've got right now. Let's say that you're, obviously this isn't you. So let's say a person is trapped in a car that's on fire, right? Let's say like the doors are jammed or something, and the person's in a car and the car is on fire, you know? And the official advice for you is to stay in your car, you know, and wait for the official fire department to come rescue you, right? You would immediately see that as stupid. And you would say, well, yeah, my door might be jammed, but I could climb out the window. I don't have to sit around here and wait for your help, you know? I mean, that's a reasonable metaphor, even though I just made it up right now. So why aren't people being educated about how they could empower themselves and roll down their window and climb out of the problem, right? I mean, that would be a reasonable thing if this were legitimate, in my opinion. And I'm not saying it's not legitimate, but certain aspects of this don't add up, you know? So why aren't people being advised about how to treat themselves? So anyway, that's going on now, and it was going on back in 2014. And so I knew I had all this information on viral infections and nutrition. So I said, you know, people need to know about this stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's when I was writing a couple of books at that time anyway. So that's when I refreshed all that information and put it in the book as a separate little book, Antiviral Nutrition. So, and I included that in some other larger books, because usually I just write big books, not small books. But in this case, I broke out and wrote a small book, Antiviral Nutrition. Well, so that was 2014. I think it was October 22nd when I published that book. And I just got a message this week on Tuesday, midnight, from Amazon saying that they were pulling the book off the market. And I was like, what are you talking about? The book's been for sale for 6 years. It's got 5-star ratings. It's a #1 bestseller in its category. And why is it getting pulled off the market right now? I mean, nothing's changed. And the other thing about that book in particular, I would say it has it has 3 important characteristics, Antiviral Nutrition. One is it's totally based on research. I mean, that's all I do throughout the entire book. Well, I have a few of my own models and conversations, but the therapeutic components are all referenced to research. You know, it's not like I'm telling people to drink some magic tea and, you know, their herpes will go away or something like that. Because herpes viruses are always there. They never disappear. So that's why it's a good example. But my point is I was very scientifically responsible in the book. I mean, it's all citations. It's more than 270 citations. So that's one characteristic of it. The other characteristic is that I wasn't like anti-vaccine. I don't even know if anti-vax was a concern back then, but I guess it was. Otherwise, I wouldn't have addressed it. So I specifically stated in the book, I didn't even talk about vaccines. but I specifically stated in the book, I said, none of this is anti-vaccine. At that time, I didn't care about vaccines, and I still don't care about them. So it was scientifically solid. It wasn't anti-medicine or anything like that. I mean, anybody who really knows me knows I love medicine. Like some of the best experiences I had in my training were, like, I loved urgent care and emergency medicine. I mean, that's what I probably should have done. Oops. Sorry, I was watching a spider in front of me, and he just disappeared, so I don't know if he's on me now or what. So it was science. It wasn't anti-medicine. And I had a third component I was going to say, and it may segue to the first one that I said, and that is the book was responsible. You know, I wasn't promising anybody a cure. The book talks about all of the common virus infections, and obviously I'm not going to write one book with one protocol and say, yeah, this book and this protocol cures everything. I'm not going to do that. Somebody else might do that, but that would be irresponsible. So I was scientifically responsible, I was ethically responsible, and I wasn't anti anything. And so they pulled the book this week. I wrote them back and I said, what's the problem here? You know, this book has been for sale for 6 years. It's got 5-star ratings. I'm a credentialed professional. It's not like I'm making this stuff up. 270 citations. And they said, we've made our decision, and we decide what we publish and what we don't, and what we sell and what we don't, and we're not going to sell your book anymore.
Wow. And
I thought that was ridiculous, because I'm sure I could go to their store right now and find articles on, you know, not simply articles, but like supportive information on how to be a sociopath. You know, like they've got books there on like hate crimes, not simply describing them, but advocating them. They've got books there. They sell books that advocate, you know, hate and racism and pedophilia and all this stuff, but they won't sell a book on nutrition for treating viral infections.
Right.
I mean, come on. So that was the situation this week. Like I said, I got that message at midnight on Tuesday, and then Wednesday and Thursday, I took the same files, the same digital files, and I turned it into an ebook to sell online.
Good. I want to detour a minute, and then I want to come back to the political and you know, financial things and why that might have been pulled and things of that sort. But I wanna ask you some more about viruses. And
sure,
you talked about what a virus is, and what about a coronavirus?
Yeah. So the basic structure of viruses is the same throughout. I guess we could probably find some exceptions, but generally you've got genetic material surrounded by a capsid, and then you've got some type of external structure which interfaces with the environment, right? So like with coronavirus, they call it the spike protein on the outside, you know, which that probably is a bit of a reveal as well, in my opinion. So if you actually look at the structure, and I'm sure you've seen pictures of them, of the coronavirus, and they show these kind of extensions. In my opinion, it's not really a spike. It's more like a club or a clover, or because it's got kind of a round tip to it. Spikes don't have round tips to them. Usually they're sharp, right? So I think that it's an inappropriate, I think the name is wrong to call it a spike. They could have called it a club or a clover or a key. Calling it a key would help people understand it more so than a spike. So, you know, what do you think? When you think of a spike, what do you think of? It sounds kind of dangerous, right?
Aggressive.
It's like, whoa, that's
dangerous.
That's kind of scary. So I think even the way that the structure has been described is kind of has a tone to it. I mean, it's like you're supposed to be scared of this thing. Coronaviruses, back to your question. So coronaviruses are a family, you know, like you've got the Smiths and the Davises and the Joneses, and you've got the coronaviruses. So they are a family of viruses. They commonly infect humans. So like when people get a cold, 15 to 30% of so-called upper respiratory tract infection or a cold, that's 15 to 30% of those are coronavirus. So most people have already had coronavirus infections. But in this case, this happens to be a coronavirus that has mutated, and we can reasonably state it appears to be more aggressive.
So is that what the 19 signifies?
No, that I think the 19 just signifies the year, but it's because it mutated, in 2019 theoretically, and that's when it became an issue. So it's just kind of an indicator.
Gotcha. And so is SARS a coronavirus?
Right. So the first SARS coronavirus, I believe, was identified in 2003, or sorry, it could have been 2013, but I think it was 2003. Yeah. That was the first, SARS, severe acute respiratory. Yeah, severe acute respiratory coronavirus. That was the first one back in 2003. And now we've got SARS-2. So coronaviruses, again, they're common, lots of different types. Sometimes they infect humans, sometimes they infect animals, sometimes they infect animals and then humans, sometimes they only infect animals. Like there's a couple of pig coronaviruses that only infect, obviously, pigs. So anyway, that's the situation. So a big family of viruses, a couple of bad actors. Some of them are kind of wimpy and they cause a respiratory infection that lasts a couple of days, no big deal. Sometimes they mutate, or let's just say, if we're going to extend the metaphor, let's just say they get a bad attitude or they get drunk or whatever, and they want to beat people up, and that's what's going on right now. So we have a more aggressive coronavirus right now, apparently, than what we've had before.
Okay, and it's more contagious than before, is my understanding.
Well, yeah, we could say that.
Okay.
But obviously, I don't want to say that. So let's say that that's true.
Okay.
So contagious here. So I'm going to break this down for you. So what does contagious mean? That's what they say, but what does it mean? So the contagious implies, I'm just making this up right now, I've never said this before, but contagious implies a relationship, right? A virus can only be contagious if the host is susceptible. So if we say, here again, Cavin, if we say the virus is more contagious, we're putting all the blame on the virus, and we're giving the virus all the power, right? So for example, like if I like a certain type of music, and for me that music's really contagious, you know what I mean? Like it like totally wakes me up, I totally groove to it, whatever. You could be immune to that. You could say, man, I'm not digging that, right? You know what I mean? Like it's a relationship. Like the virus can't be contagious if the host isn't vulnerable.
That's awesome.
So if we're going to talk about, I mean, if we're really going to think, and if we're really going to use language appropriately, we can't just say the virus is more contagious, period. You have to say the virus is more contagious among a vulnerable population, Now, if 100% of people are vulnerable to that infection or that acquisition of the virus, then you could say, well, yeah, it's a characteristic of the virus. Human defense has no place in this. There's nothing we can do, and we're just going to die, But that's obviously not the situation. So, is it more contagious? Yeah, it probably is. Maybe it is, But are some people relatively immune to it? Yeah, obviously. Do some people get it and they don't even know they have it? Obviously. In fact, the majority of people have really mild symptoms or nothing. So do you care about a virus that's very contagious if it doesn't hurt you? You know how many viruses you have in your body right now? Like in the hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
Do you care about them? Maybe. I mean, I'm not asking you details or anything, but nobody cares unless they're vulnerable to it. So a new paper was just published this week saying that people have at least 200. Maybe they said 200,000, but it was like a huge quantity of viruses. Does anybody care about that? No, because we're obviously living and we're okay with that.
Right.
So, again, is this virus more contagious? Maybe it is. Do host factors play a huge role in whether that makes any difference whatsoever? Yeah, obviously it makes a huge difference. So everything has to be contextualized.
Right. So what is a big concern is that if we're not susceptible to it, we can still be a host to it, and can we pass it on to people who are more susceptible to it?
Yeah, I think that's probably true here. That's true of most viruses.
And that's my biggest concern with it, is passing it on to others.
Right.
I'm all about keeping it like at bay. And at the same time, there are some extremely drastic measures being taken to do so that have huge implications happening worldwide. Do you think that's an appropriate response at the moment?
Well, I'll give you my opinion. We'll have to link to that article. So I just sent you an article this morning, or I don't know, maybe you sent it to me, but I think maybe I sent it back to you. So an article was just published by a guy whose name I have a hard time pronouncing. Sorry, but he works at Stanford. And he said basically, we have no idea what we're doing. He said, we don't have real numbers. We don't have good testing. We haven't tested enough of each given population to know how common is this. We don't have the numbers, basically. And if we don't have the numbers, then we have no idea what we're doing. I mean, we can guess and we can be scared and we can all hide in the closet. But the fact is, we don't have the numbers. Maybe 80% of the people have this virus, and only a small fraction of those people actually get sick, and even a smaller fraction die. If that were the case, then do we all need to be on quarantine for that reason? I would say probably not. What we should be doing, and what the naturopathic profession has always done, is look at host vulnerability and host factors. Why, instead of saying some people get it and some people don't, ask the next question, which is, why do some people get it and some people don't? Right? Not simply age. I mean, they've gone on age. Why do they talk about age so much? Why do they say kids are immune and old people get it? What's the advantage to that narrative? The advantage is you can't do anything about it. So let's assume it's correct, and I believe it is correct. I mean, we've got enough data to support that. But look at how the data is very selectively administered, right? The data given to people is the data that doesn't empower them. Oh, well, young kids are immune from it and older people are vulnerable. That doesn't help me. I can't do anything about that. Mm-hmm. Now, I could look, or somebody could look, at factors that we see in kids that we don't see in older people. What happens, as people change, as people get older, their hormones change, their melatonin levels go down. Kids have a lot more melatonin than older people. As people get older, they have other problems. Sometimes their immune system just worn down from a life of, inflammatory foods and infections and nutritional deficiencies. Well, we could change those things, right? Instead of just saying, well, people are more vulnerable because they're older. What is age other than years? I mean, obviously it's years, but what goes along with those years? More drugs, more diseases, more nutritional deficiencies quite often, institutionalized food, things like that, right? So you can decipher the language here and break it down and kind of see what they're telling you and what they're not. And I think that if we were to identify those host vulnerability factors, we could get some insights into how to manage this,
And this is what you've done a lot of in your antiviral nutrition book.
Right, totally. So, of course, we're all watching this and we're all, trying to follow whatever the new developments are. But some things aren't going to change, like just because we have this virus now for 4 months doesn't mean we have to rewrite all of medical history and all of nutritional science and everything else. It doesn't rewrite physiology forever. Some things we already know, and those things we can use, how to stimulate host defense, how to strengthen barriers, how to reduce viral replication, how to address the consequences of inflammatory challenges. I was writing it this morning. I was actually writing it. So as I just mentioned a minute ago, I had to reformat and kind of redistribute antiviral nutrition this week after it got pulled for no reason. So that cost me 2 days of work, basically. So today's my first day to actually get back to actual science and writing and things like that. And I am working on what's going to be another publication specific to coronavirus. So it'll probably be called something really creative like coronavirus antiviral nutrition or something like that. And I'll try to publish it as a book like I always have done, but maybe I'll have to publish it as a PDF that people just download, in case
Right.
I get blocked again.
Right.
The other thing, obviously, that's much faster. If I publish it myself, I can control the price and I can make it available in 2 hours or 1 hour once I get it finished. Whereas if I go through a publisher and editing and proofreading and page setting and formatting and designing the cover, are you kidding? That's going to cost me 3 months, and by then, I mean, that's a delay that's actually bordering on irresponsibility. So anyway, I am working on this information, and yes, I'm obviously looking at everything new because anytime I address a topic, I don't just recycle my own ideas. We have to look at it from scratch. And I am doing that now with coronavirus. But while I'm doing that with coronavirus, I'm also seeing that a lot of things are going to stay the same. Selenium, vitamin A, vitamin D, NAC. Licorice has already been documented to have some effectiveness against SARS from 2003. Does that mean it's going to be effective in inhibiting replication and entry of the SARS-2 virus? It doesn't mean that, no. That data is now 17 years old or something like that. So, we can't say that data that applies to SARS-1 applies to SARS-2. But does it most likely apply? Yeah, it most likely applies, So,
saying SARS-1 and SARS-2. This is SARS-2. This is another SARS. So yeah,
right. It's just a mutated version of the same previous one. I think they're 82% identical.
Okay.
So, and I did see that number. I hope I'm quoting it correctly, but they're 82%. 82%.
That's pretty close to what Dr. Silverman said as well.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, viruses as a group have enough, enough similarity that if we can target one, usually we can target its relative with some degree of effectiveness as well. But the other thing is, and this is an important point, I'm going to pass another car here. The antiviral nutritional strategy really doesn't depend on the vulnerability of the virus. The whole idea of, using a host targeted program is that it targets the defenses and the machinery of the host. The drug model, and I say this in the book, and I said it in one of my recent presentations, the drug model, and this is an important point, the drug model is to target the virus. So, they're going to target the spike protein. They're going to target the enzymes inside the virus. Why do they do that? That's the drug model. They want to sell a different drug for every virus that's out there. They want to sell a different vaccine for every virus that's out there. If they were to, if we collectively were to simply strengthen host defense against a lot of these infections, we could probably alleviate or avoid most of them, or certainly mitigate them. And then not be so dependent on antiviral drugs necessarily. And like I said, I'm not anti-medicine. I'm not anti-drug. I love drugs. That's why I loved working in the ER when I did, because somebody comes in with a problem, that's the perfect time to rescue them with drugs. You can keep people's blood pressure up. You can, reduce their inflammation, give them huge doses of steroids. Sometimes that's what people need in emergencies. That's one of the beautiful things about emergency medicine.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that we would never use, these antiviral drugs, but we could help them work better if we use nutrition along with them, because then we'd be supporting the host while we're attacking the virus. Perfect. Right now, all they want to do is talk about the virus and leave the host weak. Well, I don't think that's a good strategy. Like anybody could get killed by a chihuahua if they're weak. But if you're strong and you've got good defenses, then that chihuahua becomes irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That was a good metaphor. I'm rocking.
You're full of them, man.
I'm rocking the metaphor.
So what your nutritional antiviral nutrition is about building up the host defense. It's about taking
a lot of
care of you, your immunity, and your resilience to a infection, a virus, things of that sort. And I just wanted to say that Dr. Vasquez has made this available on his own page. And I think you have really inexpensive right now, right?
Yeah, it's like $3.
Like $3, yeah. And I'll post that in the comments.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, at some point, I mean, $3 is pretty cheap. It should be more like $12 or $15 at least. But that's what it is right now. So I'll keep it that way until April probably. All right, my battery's getting low, so I'm gonna have to relocate inside so I can charge. But we can keep talking.
What I'm saying is we're building up the host defense instead of trying to attack the virus, which is fine. We can go after the virus as well, but let's build up our immunity.
Yeah.
And that's where the nutritional protocols come. And this is interesting because your book on nutrition to build up the host defense has been taken off of Amazon without explanation.
Correct.
And what are your thoughts surrounding that? What are the politics of a pandemic, of this kind of pandemic?
Oh, well, I mean, that's a big question. But, so I don't have any specific insight, and I don't have any, let's assume I don't have any insight, and let's assume I don't have any conspiracy theories. But I've got open eyes, and I can read and I can see things, So anytime major systems undergo major turmoil, that's a big opportunity for somebody else to gain power in whatever the dynamic is, whether it's a market for this or a new product here or, covering up some other conversation. So, we started talking a few minutes ago about the Ebola thing that was going on in 2014. Well, that conversation disappeared immediately after certain governmental elections that took place. So, and you can see this is from Politico. It's not me making it up. But what you see with the conversation in 2014, Politico called it the lie of the year. You saw this huge ramping up of conversation about Ebola, and then it disappeared immediately after these governmental elections. Well, so what does that do? How do people vote when they're scared for their own survival? Do they vote for free education, improved infrastructure, mass transit, time off from school or time off from work? Do they vote for those things, or do they vote for defense, and pharmaceutical subsidies, right? I mean, you can answer that question. I mean, the answer is obvious. So when people are scared, they vote in different patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And so who benefits from that? You know, the answer to that question is pretty obvious as well.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, we're in election year. The United States is having an election year. And now, guess what? We've got a big emergency. Well, what do people do when they're scared? They rally around the flag, you know. Conversations get limited, more censorship. I mean, I have to believe that I just got censored this week. I mean, obviously I did. They pulled my antiviral nutrition book from the market during, you know, obviously, you know, arguably the biggest viral pandemic we've had in our lifetimes. I mean, that's not just a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody structured that. So I'm going to go relocate myself so I can get to a charger so my phone doesn't die while we keep talking. So, but anyway, obviously a lot of politics involved.
A lot of politics involved, and you know, it's still important to keep it at bay, but clearly there's something things aren't quite adding up, and when things aren't quite adding up, there's a lot of there's a lot of things to explore, and I'm so appreciative that I have the opportunity to speak with people like you, who can really like dissect and look at what's going on, because what happens with people when they're scared is they get in their limbic brains, and when when that's firing, their frontal lobe just shuts off, right?
Right.
They're not controlled.
As if it were working previously, but it's certainly not working now.
Precisely. And so taking a look, stepping back, regulating your nervous system, and actually taking a look at what's going on is so important in times like these. Instead of and what I also often see around elections and pandemics, like kind of the same divisive, you know, antagonistic situation. When people just start attacking each other, and it becomes just limbic systems fighting limbic systems.
Right.
And it's and that I think is part of the politics of a pandemic, is like bringing this into existence, this fighting, battling situation. And the fact is, it is more contagious. Our emotions and our energies and attacks on each other is far more contagious than a virus, even corona.
Right. Yeah, well, I think something that a lot of people sense, and something that you alluded to just now, is people are smart enough to know when something's not right.
Totally.
But a lot of times, I guess I just have to say this the way that it occurs to me. A lot of times people are smart enough to know that something's not right, but they may not be sophisticated enough to figure out what that problem is, you know? And that's happened to all of us. It's happened to me, you know. I've been in situations where it's like, I know something's not right here, but I don't know what it is, you know? But the third step would be to have enough knowledge along with enough sophistication to be able to create an alternate narrative or to create an alternate solution, right? So the solution that's being offered to people right now is they're trapped in a burning car and they're supposed to wait for the fire department to come get them out of the car, right? Obviously, people are going to start being scared and irritated and, you know, outraged with each other. So let's just go with the metaphor. Let's say you've got a person, and this is an unfortunate metaphor, but it's actually somewhat accurate. Let's say two people are trapped in a burning car, and the police arrive and the doors are jammed and the police say, stay in your car until the fire department gets here. Well, if a person is the driver, they're going to look to the other people in the car and they're going to say, get me out of here, do something. Why aren't you doing anything, right? I mean, that's a reasonable metaphor. So we become irritable and we put the blame on other people to solve our problems when we don't know how to solve our problems. Even if, like you just said, even if all we need to do is calm down and roll down the window and climb out the window, you know?
Mm-hmm.
What if this has a simple solution? And I'm not suggesting in this conversation right now, I'm not suggesting that it does. I'm not trying to say, oh, well, this is a simple solution and I have the solution. I'm not saying that. But I'm saying generally, what if a problem has a simple solution? See, that's part of the medical paradigm. You ready for this? I don't know if you're ready for this. Here it is. Part of the medical paradigm is that serious problems require serious solutions. Ta-da. So let's assume this is a serious problem. Let's assume everything they say is correct. It's contagious. We've never seen anything like this before. We don't know what's happening. That's all nonsense anyway. But let's say it. Again, part of the medical paradigm is fear, concern, serious problems require serious measures, right? So cancer is a serious disease. From the medical perspective, it requires serious treatment, which is obviously chemotherapy and radiation. That's about as serious as it gets in the medical world. The idea that a serious solution, I'm going to give you a very good example. It's a good thing you're sitting down. I'm going to give you a good example here in a minute. The idea that a serious problem could have a simple solution is virtually unheard of in medicine, right? So I'm going to go with a good example, and this is not only a good example, it's virtually the perfect example. Mm-hmm. So in China, in many parts of China, the people develop a heart disease called Kashan disease. Starts with a K, Kashan disease. Kashan disease, I think it mostly affects kids, but it is a fatal heart disease that affects kids in certain parts of China. It's caused by an enterovirus that goes from the gut and embeds itself in the heart and causes this heart disease. It's not cardiovascular disease. It's a disease of the muscle itself. It's called a Coxsackie virus. It's an enterovirus. Coxsackie virus B, I believe it is. So, you still good? I just lost your video.
Yeah, I'm still good.
So here we are. We're talking about these kids in China. Again, I believe it's kids. Let's just say people in China susceptible to this heart disease. It destroys the heart muscle. And it's caused by this Coxsackie B virus, okay? It's a mutated Coxsackie B virus. That's a serious problem affecting, let's say, millions of people. What's the solution? What has been defined as the solution to that problem? Nutritional supplementation with selenium. Why? Because the Coxsackie B virus can only become pathologic in this context if it's mutated, and it mutates in a host who is deficient in selenium. And that, of course, only happens if the food and the soil is deficient in selenium, and that's what China is famous for. China, the terrain of China, is famous for being deficient in selenium. That's part of the reason why you see these diseases coming out of China. And I'm not being racist or ethnocentric or whatever. I'm just stating the fact. You can look it up. I'll document it in my book. The terrain of China is deficient in selenium. That makes the population there of humans and animals more vulnerable to viral infections. That's why you see the Asian flu. That's why you see the Hong Kong flu. And that's why you see this new coronavirus from China, right?
Wow.
So again, what was the problem? The problem was this muscle disease of the heart, cardiomyopathy in China, in the Chinese population. What was the cause of it? A viral infection in the heart. What was the cause of the viral infection? Selenium deficiency. So they started supplementing their population with selenium, and this disease virtually disappeared.
Yeah.
Also, for people who have the heart disease, Cachon disease, treating them directly with selenium alleviates the heart disease. So it's not only for prevention, but it's also for treatment.
So yeah,
right? How's that for?
That's the lie that many people believe for just about everything. The size of the problem is proportional to the size of the solution or the complexity of the solution. And that's not the case. It's almost never the case. The solution you just boom. But
so let's say let's go with a quick metaphor. Another one. I'm gonna bust out another quick metaphor. So let's say you've got a leak in your roof, right? You call a contractor and you say, hey man, I need emergency help. It's 2:00 in the morning. I'll pay you extra if you come over here and fix this leak, right? And the contractor shows up and he says, he or she, and says, you need a whole new roof. I got to replace this roof. I'm going to have to get overtime, extra crew here. We're going to have to replace this roof. We're going to start immediately. We're going to save you from this problem. We're going to be here on the job in the next hour. It's going to cost you about $30,000, but we're going to save this. We're going to save your house. If you don't fix the roof right now, your whole house is going to get ruined, right? Well, that's the model of a big problem needs a big solution, right? The other model is you could get up on your roof and replace one tile and silicone that thing in for $2 and you got a solution, right? So, we all have to be careful when we're offered solutions that are very heroic, because I'm sure, part of this is like archetypal, right? From a Carl Jung standpoint. Like we all have a little kid in all of us, right? Part of us wants to be rescued and fixed. Part of us wants to be redeemed. Part of us wants to be detoxified. Part of us wants to be, recovered. So anytime we perceive a problem in our world, we'd be sure as hell happy to have somebody else fix that for us, But another approach, and sometimes we need external help. I'm not saying that we don't, but sometimes we can empower ourselves to solve our own problems.
This is the entire point of what I'm doing these perspective series on, is to help people to empower themselves during this time where it's like there's the entourage of fear-based I want to say marketing, but that's not the word. Fear-based perpetuation of fear, essentially. And in times like this, it's very disempowering, because what is fear? Fear is uncertainty about what's going to happen, and it is feeling out of control. And as you and I have talked about, fear is a very profitable place. If you're scared, your roof's going to collapse. You're going to fork over the, $30,000 to fix it.
Right.
And people act on they act from that place, from that fear space.
Right. And, we could spend all day on that topic, because people are programmed from a very young age in just about all cultures. They're programmed to be dependent, to feel insecure, to feel like they're defective and they need external solution. So, that's part of the cultural programming that people get internationally. So, people at some point have to decide how much of that they want to carry throughout their lives, you know?
Yeah.
So another thing, again, I'm not saying, I'm speaking generally, and therefore what I'm saying may or may not apply to certain situations. But I do remember a book that I read many years ago. Actually, it was 1997. And one of the lines in the book was, for a prey to be vulnerable to a predator, the prey has to agree to take on the role of the prey, you know. And in some cases that's true, and in some cases maybe it does or doesn't apply, you know. I mean, all metaphors either apply or don't to specific situations. But you can still see some truth in that, right? If someone's in an abusive relationship, they've chosen to stay in that abusive relationship. And at some point they can choose to leave. Mm-hmm. Whether that's a romantic relationship or a friendship that's toxic, or a worker-employee relationship. But to remain in a disempowered position in any power dynamic is a choice. It's not an absolute choice in all situations, you know. So if the military shows up at your house and decide that if a person wakes up one day and they've got the military police outside their house and they get executed, yeah, they probably didn't have a lot of options there, you know. So again, I'm not saying that all these solutions have or all these metaphors apply to all situations, but I am saying that a lot of times, you know, we can empower ourselves, and maybe we're not omnipotent, we're not all powerful just because we empower ourselves. I mean, it's not like people go from being victim to, you know, superhuman all of a sudden. But we can go from being victim to, you know, a bit more empowered and then a bit more autonomous, and that doesn't make us superheroes. It just means we have more options. And again, going back to the theme that we're focusing on today with viral infections, you know, if people are ignorant, and we're all ignorant, ignorant and stupid are two of my favorite words. And not just I don't just use those for other people. I use them for me. Like we're all stupid. Totally. We're all ignorant, and we're designed by society, the way social structure is. We're all designed to be stupid and ignorant. And I'm saying that about me, and I've got 3 doctorate degrees, and I've published 100 articles and 35 books, you know. Mm-hmm. We're all designed structurally and educationally, we're designed and structured to be stupid and ignorant. But we can change that.
So I love that you brought up ignorant, because ignorance is so much. I think ignorance is like a superpower. What we can ignore strategically, be like, I'm not paying attention to that shit. That's a superpower. That's like choosing where our attention is placed. So yeah, I'm absolutely ignorant. I ignore a bunch of stuff that doesn't matter.
Sure. So, but you're talking about being like selectively ignorant and consciously ignorant. Like I'm going to ignore this email. I'm going to ignore whatever this problem is. I'm talking about being ignorant of things that we should know and that we would benefit from if we knew them, right? Mm-hmm. That's when I talk about people being ignorant, that's what I'm talking about, because those are the things that we're ignorant of, you know? And I could go through, why are all medical doctors structurally composed and created to be ignorant about nutrition? Mm. Why does medical education completely exclude the topic of nutrition? That's ignorance by design.
Right.
Why do people graduate with a bachelor's degree or a master's degree or a doctorate degree and they have no training whatsoever in problem solving or public speaking or leadership? Because the educational system, which is somewhat coordinated, you know, it's not an accident. The educational system doesn't want people who are articulate, who can communicate their thoughts, who can write, who can, you know, create convincing arguments, who can deconstruct stupid arguments, right? So, I mean, we have to look at the way this whole system works. That occurred to me just this past week, actually. I was thinking, so I've been through 3 doctorate programs, and all doctorate programs, all programs talk about critical thinking and all that kind of stuff. That's all for the catalog, There's no critical thinking. There can be levels of detailed thinking, but I've never seen critical thinking taught in any program I've been in. They teach volume, they teach perspective sometimes, but they don't teach critical thinking. So something came up this past week, and I was thinking to myself, maybe it was this whole virus problem, but I was thinking to myself, like, I don't see any active problem solving going on at all, right? There's no, what we have is perception of problem, midbrain response to problem, which is stay away from me. I'll stay away from you if you stay away from me. And I want somebody to rescue me, right? Like that's the response that you're seeing to this problem. Social avoidance and they're waiting on drugs and vaccines, right? Well, I mean, can we as a species do better than that?
Totally.
Some of us as individuals can do better than that, but I don't know, like I'm not seeing a species, I'm not seeing a planetary solution in terms of structured problem solving being applied to this problem. And that makes me suspicious of the problem itself, right? So it's like, whoa, there's no thinking going on in this conversation. So
what are some tactical things that people can do to empower themselves right now?
Well, I think so. I'm gonna answer your question, and I think in 2 different ways. One is generally, and the other is more specifically. So, anytime we're presented, or we encounter, or we discover a problem, the first step is always identifying and defining the problem, characterizing the problem. What is this problem? So whether it's a leaky roof that we talked about before, or somebody's trapped in their car and they can't get out, or they got an infection, we have to have some awareness of what the problem is. So step number 1 is define the problem as best we can. Step number 2, this is a little bit elementary. It's not even academic, but I'm going to say it anyway because it does apply to the situation. Step number 2, after identifying the nature of the problem and the perceived consequence of the problem, step number 2 is identify all the possible solutions, right? And then put those solutions in a hierarchical order of availability, effectiveness, and safety, and then determine which of those are appropriate for use in the situation based on logistics and whatever, right? Identify the problem, create a buffet or a catalog of solutions, and then step number 3 is implement solutions. With the current situation, we haven't even gone to step 2 yet. We haven't even identified what the possible solutions are to this problem. But we're already implementing the ones that are most basic and most disempowering, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if that's what you accept, then that's what you get,
Right.
So going back, that was my general answer to your question. What could people do about this situation that we're in? I actually like social distancing. I use it as a lifestyle. So I'm okay. It's like I'm home. Now, but I have the social and cultural luxury of being able to stay home and having a home to stay in, for one thing.
Yeah.
And, that was also by design. We moved out of the big city a couple of years ago because we thought, things are getting weird. And if if things get more weird, we need to be someplace that's safe. And lo and behold, we are someplace that's safe. So what could people do? Yeah, social distancing, I recommend it as a lifestyle, not simply in response to pandemics. That's a little bit of a joke. But, you know, the next step is, here's the thing. Let's go back to geography, or not geography, geometry. You know, I think I studied that when I was 14 or 15 years old. One of the only things beneficial to learning anything about math, you know, beyond basic math, is when we have to solve equations that have two variables, right? If you have an equation that has two variables, you're going to have a hell of a hard time figuring out the solution, right? But if you have an equation that has one variable, usually you can figure out. You just look at it and you run the thing backwards and sideways and you figure it out, right? In this case, here's my point. In this case, we've got an equation that has two variables. And we cannot solve that equation because we don't know what x is and we don't know what y is yet. With more time, we're going to figure out what x is. Let's just say x is the virus in this conversation. In more time, they'll do more tests, they'll do more studies, we'll be able to characterize this virus, we'll be able to say, oh yeah, man, it's really contagious. But again, like I said, contagious, you can't read the word or say the word contagious without respecting the fact that it represents a relationship. So nobody, no intelligent person, if I can go that far with it, no intelligent person who really is trying to talk about this and communicate, no one can say that X is contagious or whatever. I mean, we can kind of say that in some senses. You know, some viruses are more contagious than others. I mean, that is the fact. But it always depends on the host as well. AIDS, for example, isn't really very contagious, thankfully. I mean, yeah, people can pass it on to each other, but it's not contagious. It's not radically, let's say, contagious. Hepatitis C is very contagious. Measles is very contagious. So those are viruses that typically win the battle. They have a good chance of getting in and starting an infection. But again, we still have to look at the host factor of that, and that's the other variable in the equation. So if X is the virus and Y is the human variable, the question then becomes, right now we don't know how to define X, but we could do some things to help define Y, that's us, and we could help to strengthen our own defenses, right? So step number one, strengthening barriers so that our skin, mucosal membranes are well defended. So that requires nutrition like vitamin A, vitamin D, zinc, also B vitamins, of course. Step number two is, what could we do to inhibit viral replication? I know how to inhibit viral replication using nutrients because I've studied it now for 10 years, right? So we can do certain things to inhibit viral replication. Some of those strategies work better for DNA viruses versus RNA viruses, but they all still work to some extent. Coronavirus is an RNA virus, so it might be a little trickier. Step number three in my program is strengthening immune defense, and that's what we talked about. That's what you and I have mentioned a few times back and forth. That's not the same as strengthening barriers. So barriers is step number one. Step number two is replication. Step number three is immune response. Immune response has two broad components to it. Immune response is immune defense, which is your immune system attacking the virus or creating antibodies or engaging in cell-mediated immunity. That's immune defense. But the immune response has another component, and that is the ability of the immune response to self-regulate and reduce excessive activity of the inflammatory response. So for example, in the medical model, you want a strong immune response. That's why they put adjuvants in the vaccines, right? They're trying to create more inflammation. But the reality is actually different from that. You want an immune response. You want to strengthen defenses, but you also want an anti-inflammatory component to that response.
You want to mediate that response.
Right. You want to mediate it. You want to modulate it. You want to control it. You want to promote tolerance. At the same time that you're promoting defense, you want to promote tolerance. Well, shazam, that's what we can do with nutrition that we can't do with drugs. So for example, vitamin A strengthens defenses, but it also promotes tolerance. Vitamin D promotes defenses and it promotes tolerance. N-acetylcysteine is another really good example. N-acetylcysteine promotes tolerance and it promotes immune defenses at the same time. So, we've got this virus that we haven't completely defined. We don't understand it. Nobody understands it completely. Yeah, eventually they'll define it and they'll give it some descriptions. None of that is going to change the fact that we can still modulate the human part of that equation. Now, we could emphasize certain treatments or certain nutritional supplements more than others based on given infections. So for example, like for herpes infections, works very well. And for SARS, let me just think for a moment. For SARS infections, I'm talking about SARS-1 in this case, licorice also works quite well. In the case of SARS-1, licorice has been shown to inhibit viral entry and it also inhibits viral replication. And with herpes, licorice works extremely well. Through a slightly different mechanism in that it supports immune defense against the herpes through increased production of interferon. But also licorice, the component of licorice called glycyrrhetinic acid or glycyrrhizin actually appears to bind directly onto the herpes virus. So it's almost like a drug. It's almost like a target getting hit with an arrow. Speaking of arrows, you can probably see my bow behind me. I'm like the metaphor guy, but so if licorice, glycyrrhetinic acid, binds to and inhibits the herpes virus particle directly, that's not necessarily the same for influenza or hepatitis or HIV. So like I was saying, viruses have their characteristics and our treatments also have their own characteristics which may apply more or less in a given type of infection. But regardless of that, certain things, like I said at the start, certain things aren't going to change. You have to have zinc in your system in order to have a competent immune response. Zinc is directly antiviral for viruses such as rhinovirus, but also zinc specifically inhibits the coronavirus. I'm trying to think of which coronavirus it is. One of the coronaviruses is specifically inhibited by zinc. Maybe they all are. I just don't know. But like I was saying, we have to strengthen host defenses. We have to try to inhibit replication, and we have to strengthen barriers. So let me summarize. Let me go to the fourth point, and then I'll summarize. The fourth part of the overall treatment strategy is supporting and restoring cellular health and also systemic health. And again, the naturopaths do a really good job of that. The osteopathic profession actually has some good research on that as well. So in osteopathic medicine, we have certain treatments called osteopathic manipulative medicine that have been shown to help people get over pneumonia, for example. And it's not a drug, it's a manipulative treatment. It's not chiropractic, it's not massage, it's a specific treatment. But those are things we can do. So again, I'm going to summarize the 4 components one more time. Step number 1 is addressing the virus, either trying to kill the virus or blocking its entry. That's step number 1 of my plan. Step number 2 is inhibiting viral replication. Step number 3 is supporting immune response. Immune response has 2 components. One is defense, and the other is controlling inflammation. So you don't want all the inflammation to just go crazy like, napalm. You need to have control over that inflammation. If the inflammation's not controlled, that's when people get into sepsis and acute respiratory distress syndrome, ARDS, which is what kills people with pneumonia, a pneumonia-like condition, and influenza, and et cetera. That's the whole cytokine storm. Mm-hmm. You don't want a cytokine storm. You need to have some control over this inflammatory process. And nutrients can help provide that balance.
Right. That's the modulation of the immune response.
Right. And then step number 4 is supporting cellular machinery like mitochondrial function, which I've also written on, and lymphatic flow and vagal tone and stuff like that. I'm sure all your people know about vagal tone. So, those are things we can do. We can do them right now. We can do them safely. We've got good evidence to support it. And so those are things people could do while they're sitting around. Like learning is optional and it's available all the time, right? So you've got millions of people right now, millions. You got millions of people stuck in their homes and they have no idea what to do with themselves. Right? They're watching YouTube, they're arguing with each other, and maybe they're doing some good things like exploring their childhood traumas, or fixing the garage or whatever, or learning a new language. Probably some people are using their time wisely. I'm not saying that everyone's wasting their time. But one of the things people could be doing during this time is reading about antiviral nutrition.
Yes.
Shazam. They could learn about this stuff so they're not going to be victims to this narrative for the rest of their lives.
They're able to empower themselves. Absolutely.
Right.
And that's what I really, that was what drew me to you to begin with. Was I was in a place where I was relearning how to eat and walk. My left hand was flexed inward,
Right.
And I was like, all right, I'm gonna need to figure this out. In addition to functional neurology and other things that were happening, I got to figure this out. I need to empower myself. And it's the same thing here. We need to empower ourselves. And what's awesome is we have this amazing resource called the internet that can bring us really brilliant things. And I love that I found you and found your writing, and clearly you make your concepts understandable with enormous amount of metaphors. You're the metaphor king right now. And
I'm busting them out.
You're just killing it. And I'm just so appreciative. So just to recap, number 1, prevent the virus from getting in, which is building up our barriers, our gut barrier, skin barrier, our lung barriers.
Right.
And so there's a nutritional component to that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you're trying to prevent this virus from getting into, social distancing, hand washing, that's part of it. Yeah, and those are reasonable parts of it. If you can disinfect certain surfaces, that's great. And if you can strengthen the barriers, like you were just saying, to block so let's say you're walking down the street and somebody sneezes on you and you've got the virus in your mouth or in your nose. If you have strong barriers and if you have certain non-specific immune defenses on those barriers, then you're less likely to get the infection. So part of that barrier defense they're called antimicrobial peptides. And your body can only make antimicrobial peptides if you have enough vitamin D. So all of these institutionalized elderly patients who are vulnerable to this infection, 90% of them are vitamin D deficient. Of course they're going to be vulnerable to this infection. They're all institutionalized. They live indoors, at least in some countries they get out and get some sunshine. But in the United States, I've never seen that. And I've done some work in like geriatric, so-called old people's homes, retirement facilities, whatever you want to call it. Like they have no system for getting people vitamins, let alone sunshine. So anyway, virtually 100% of those people are vitamin D deficient. If they're vitamin D deficient, they're not going to create antimicrobial peptides, and that's going to make them more susceptible to this problem. Mm. Well, we can either let that go as it is, or we can fix it.
Right. We can supplement with vitamin D, or we can go outside, or both.
Right.
And we're also talking about the immune system regulating, having it turn on and having it mitigate itself, and building up our cellular and systemic health, so our mitochondria, things of that sort. And this all points back to nutrition. And we're talking about vitamin A, how that amps up, it strengthens our immune system and it regulates our immune system. Vitamin D, same thing. N-acetylcysteine, and these all produce that. Oh, and also licorice, zinc, and selenium are 3 things as well. Mm-hmm. Am I missing anything?
No, those are good, but, well, I mean, yeah, you're missing. There are other things we could do. Sometimes drugs, some drugs have been shown to be effective, like against Ebola, for example, and a lot of other nutrients, and then a lot of other herbs like silymarin and lemon balm and things like that. But, and I discussed just about all the important things in my book. But we have to talk about risk too. We can't just be Pollyannic about this. We can't just say, oh, well, nutrition's going to save the day, even though it probably could if it were used strategically. So let me just very briefly talk about risk involved with some of these nutritional treatments. And the 2 that we really have to talk about to have a responsible conversation, we have to talk about the risk of vitamin A, and we have to talk about the risk of licorice. So vitamin A is one of the only nutrients that really has risk associated with consuming, kind of a therapeutic dose. So I'll try to say that quick. My phone is getting really hot, so I'm kind of getting nervous here. I don't know if my phone's going to blow up or something. But the risk of vitamin A is that it can be toxic to the liver mostly, and then have some other consequences as well. So you have to be careful with vitamin A toxicity. You have to know how to dose it correctly. You have to know what to look out for in terms of toxicity. So I'll talk about dosing just a little bit, but I'll talk about toxicity. So let's just say this. As a general rule, people should not supplement with vitamin A at high doses, not for more than a week. So, for example, when I was treating patients on a more regular basis, I learned through experience that I had to tell people, you're sick now, you're doing this nutritional program now, but you're not going to do this program forever, even though in some cases they might. But if people are going to use high-dose vitamin A, they need to limit that to 5 or 7 days, maybe 10 days. The toxicity of vitamin A looks like bone pain, head pain or headache, dry skin, chapped lips, and then some other abnormalities on laboratory tests. But people have to be aware of the toxicity of vitamin A. And some people get toxic with vitamin A starting at 25,000 international units, and that's a pretty low dose. So again, people have to be aware of that. And the other thing is with licorice. With licorice, a glass or a cup of licorice tea is a therapeutic dose of licorice. And it looks like this. This is licorice tea. So this is licorice root. steeped with hot water for 10 minutes or whatever, and then it creates this yellow, amber colored beverage. And that's what licorice tea looks like. A cup of licorice tea is a therapeutic dose of glycyrrhizin. It's about 32 milligrams of glycyrrhizin. And for some people, that can also be a toxic dose if they were to consume that for more than 2 weeks. So the consequence of licorice, or the side effects of licorice, sometimes it's a benefit, but the consequence of licorice, let's say, is that it can cause potassium depletion and it can cause hypertension. So again, you and I could talk about licorice. We can talk about licorice inhibiting viruses and blocking SARS replication and blocking herpes viruses, et cetera. All that's true, but that doesn't mean we can live off of licorice, Licorice, if consumed in excess, can cause potassium depletion and it can cause hypertension. And that's true of the root, which I use to make a tea, but it's also true of licorice candy. So if people can get toxic from licorice by consuming licorice candy as well. So, the cliche of everything in moderation. And sometimes people get hurt by these things, and sometimes people get lucky. Like I went through a period of my life about 23 years ago, and I was drinking licorice tea every day because I had adrenal failure, and I was drinking licorice tea every day, and I didn't have any problems with it, but I could have had problems with it because I was drinking a lot of very strong licorice tea, and so I got lucky, and some people don't get lucky, So with vitamin A, you have to be careful. With licorice, you have to be careful. Most of the other things, I don't think are too bad.
Right. Zinc and copper.
What
about copper?
So when people consume a lot of zinc in the form usually of nutritional supplements, unless they're eating raw oysters every day, if you start getting into the range of zinc, like 50 milligrams a day or so, that could and quite likely will begin to impair the absorption of copper. So, if you're above 30 milligrams or 50 milligrams per day of zinc, you probably should take some extra copper, somewhere between 2 to 4 milligrams. The consequence, so let's say someone's immune suppressed, like their immune system's not working and they're zinc deficient. So we're trying to make their immune system work better, we give them zinc. In the process of giving them a supplement of zinc, we could end up blocking the absorption of copper. The first consequence of copper deficiency is immune suppression. So the paradox, I call it the zinc paradox. The paradox is if you give someone zinc to support their immune function, if you give them too much without copper, then you actually cause immune suppression via copper deficiency.
Gotcha. All right. So we have some tools to empower ourselves with. Nutrition tools.
Right.
I'm really looking forward to diving into your book, and I will be posting that down below. What else are you working on these days?
Well, right now only this.
Okay.
And you could share these videos with your people as well. I actually was thinking about updating the Antiviral Nutrition book last year, and I had created 2 videos last year. One was a review of the entire protocol, and the other was focused exclusively on N-acetylcysteine or NAC or acetylcysteine. So those are on my website. They're on the internet. My website, by the way, is inflammationmastery.com/antiviral is where people can find that information. So people can watch those videos for free. I think they can actually download the videos for free as well. I mean, I don't really care. I just want people to get the information. So those are ways, as you had just said, that people can empower themselves. But again, empowerment doesn't mean being all powerful, right? Empowerment just means you've got some tools in your bag and you have some things you can do. That doesn't mean it's going to work every time for every person in every situation. But generally speaking, we've got some good science, and we've got we've got science of effectiveness, and we have the experience of use and safety. So we don't simply have things we can do. I mean, we could do anything. We could dance in circles, and try to solve our problems. But we have effective things we can do. We have things that are proven to work. And just like with drugs, we use them and we hope it works. And if it doesn't work, sometimes we raise the dose or lower the dose or we add something else. But these are things we can legitimately, use for ourselves and offer to our patients and clients.
Perfect. Yeah, I want to say again how grateful I am to have this conversation with you, and for all the work you've done. It has been extremely helpful for me in my recovery, and continues to be. I love how your presentations are so concise, and every presentation you put out, you walk away with tools that you can do
Right.
away, and just super appreciative of your work, how you really evolve medicine in so many ways and evolve the practices of so many others. Like, your reach is exponential, and it is such a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for the invitation. I'm glad on a personal level, I'm glad you and I finally got to talk.
Yeah.
It's been a while, since obviously I saw you in 2013, and then I saw you again last year.
Yes.
But, even in those situations, we didn't have a lot of time.
Real quick, let me tell the story of 2013. I
Right.
had been doing some research. I had seen that changing my nutrition helped. So I was like, whoa,
Right.
what's this functional medicine stuff about? And I was, Googling functional medicine all over the place, and your name kept coming up. And I was like, and I started reading your stuff, and like, you had videos online as well that
Mm.
I think you were an adjunct professor at Bastyr University at the time, and you were making video lectures available to your students. And, I was able to watch these college level lectures from this brilliant man right here and learn from them, and then use what I learned, start implementing what I learned in order to restore my health. And I reached out to you. I think Facebook actually like suggested you as a friend. And I was like,
Something.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And then I sent you a message, and I just was thanking you for the online resources, told you a bit about my story, and you invited me to the International Conference on Human Nutrition and Functional Medicine.
Right.
Can you say that
Yeah.
10 times fast?
I probably could. But.
Probably could. Superhero over here. Yeah, and while I was at that conference, it was on the brain day. Yeah, you had a whole day dedicated to the brain. I remember when you sent me that message, I was literally like, I was living at my mom's place at the time. I was recovering at my mother's home, and I was like, Mom, we have to go to this. And she's like, she got me there, and super appreciative of that as well. And that's where
Yeah, it was a good experience. We had you up on stage too. I'm sure you remember.
Yeah. And that's where things began to solidify for me, because I went up there. It was on the brain day. We went out, we had a cup of coffee, and you were like, what was the most important therapy you did after your brain injury? And I was like, honestly, Alex, healing my gut was everything. And you're like, we need you on stage. And
well, that's a good example of what I had said before, and that is the medical model is serious problems require serious interventions. And they're always going to sideline nutrition because they're going to assume that it doesn't matter or it's not whatever. But look, in your case, you had a serious problem that didn't require a serious big league intervention. We're not talking about putting in a shunt or whatever. change your diet, improve your gut microbiome. Now everyone's talking about microbiome, including me, I guess. But, you know, back in 20 years ago, nobody was talking about that stuff.
Right.
But even your situation, this is my point, even your situation is an example of where a serious problem, sure, of course you needed some serious interventions at the time, but later what you needed were things that weren't quite so serious. And, come on, like life doesn't have to be so dramatic all the time, right? Like, do we really have to, like the medical profession is the biggest like drama queen in the world in terms of playing this role of victim and savior and persecutor at the same time. So something, maybe I'll add this to the video later, but something called the Karpman drama triangle. And the three components of that are you have to have a victim, you have to have a hero, and you have to have a persecutor or the person who's doing the damage, right? And the medical profession plays all of those roles. They're the victim. Look, we've got this infection. We don't know what to do. We're helpless here. We're going to have to quarantine everybody, right? That's how they play the victim. The prosecutor, mandatory vaccinations for everybody. Whether the vaccines work or not, irrelevant. Everybody has to get vaccines. A couple of years ago, they were trying to put statin drugs in the drinking water, right? That's also part of being kind of a persecutor, or that's being overly aggressive. And then they want to be the hero, right? So they want to say, we've got the solution, we've got the new this, or we've got the new drug, right? So if you look at it's called the Karpman drama triangle, but where people vacillate and oscillate from one location to the next. I mean, the medical profession does that all the time. That's why people get confused and they have a hard time figuring it out, It's because it's a shape-shifting.
Yeah.
That's what makes it hard to figure out.
Makes for good TV, good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
stories.
Why do you have so many television shows that are medically oriented? Right? So obviously television channels and television stations, they promote drugs because they promote, these multi-million-dollar drug advertisements. But here's the thing. Audiences are not neutral. Audiences have to be cultivated. So how do you cultivate an audience to be receptive to the drug advertisement? You have to have a television show that sets the stage for the drug that's going to be advertised, right? That's why you see so many television programs where the doctor's the hero. Right? You don't see programs where the nutritionist is the hero or the massage therapist saves the day. Man, I had a headache. I thought I was dying, and I got a good massage. You don't see that, right? You see the medical doctors, and they're rushing in with the staff and the nurses, and they all have stethoscopes on their necks to make them look like they know what they're doing. I mean, come on, it's a setup. They're trying to condition and cultivate and manicure or groom the audience so that they'll be receptive to the drug message, So this is a system-wide thing, and we're all exposed to it from the times we're kids, I remember getting vaccines when I was a kid. I remember going to the doctor's office and waiting there. I remember being told I was going to be a big boy and I had to be a good boy, and I sat on the table with the crinkly, tissue paper and all that. I remember all that.
I remember that.
That's part of growing up in a lot of cultures is you have to receive these official, I lost the word because I'm a little bit hungry right now, but you have to receive these certain rites of passage, and vaccination for kids is a rite of passage. That's part of growing up in the dominant culture,
So actually, I wanted to touch on this. I was recently informed that Denmark passed a law that allows their government to inject everybody with the COVID vaccine. But I'm not sure whether it's when it's available or or whatever, but it's mandatory. They're able to inject everybody.
Yeah, well,
And
there you
I
go.
was thinking about the politics of a pandemic, how this sets the stage to where everybody is in a place where they're like, yeah, make vaccines mandatory, like, because they're in their limbic brain. And I see that that potential on the horizon as well.
Yeah. Some people would argue that that's what the entire theme of this event is.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
That's what.
But again, that goes back. I can have this conversation. It doesn't mean I'm being anti-vaccine. I could have this conversation on any topic, whether it's cars or gasoline dependence or whatever. What we're talking about here is being cultured in a certain way to be dependent on whatever the dominant power structure is. So we're all set up for that from the times we're kids, regardless of vaccines or anything else. We are conditioned to be dependent, insecure from a young age.
Your reception's pretty choppy. I understood you, and I totally agree. That's how it's we're often conditioned, and this is again where the empowerment comes from, and thank you for the tools for empowerment. We have the abilities. Let's empower ourselves.
Yeah. So, we have to overcome that social conditioning to be able to do so. But, we have lots of different ways to do so. And one of them is reading and learning, and especially, learning about our own psyches, but also learning about specific topics,
Yes.
No one can be empowered and ignorant of facts at the same time, right? People can be egotistic and they can be arrogant and they can be confident, right? But it's a false confidence. True confidence, in many ways, comes from competence, and competence requires discipline and knowledge. People don't become knowledgeable by sitting around doing nothing. It takes effort. At least, like, in the example that you gave, at least watch videos that are educational, and maybe even, read a book that's complicated every once in a while.
Start reading peer-reviewed research, or read Dr. Vasquez's book, $3. Get that.
Yeah.
Night of these times.
Yeah. So it's 69 pages of specific to antiviral. And then I added a lot of other information because it's a PDF document. So I could add other documents on top of the original for more information and videos and hyperlinks and downloads and things like that. So
and it has links to a bunch of videos and all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
well, good. Thank you so much. Thank you for your work, and we'll get through this pandemic, and hopefully not.
Right.
I mean, we've had many in the past. Let's we can move through this one as well. What's interesting about this one is we have the internet in such a heightened state right now. So
right.
Go ahead.
I just we had a little bit of, right when you were talking about, I think you said Denmark was mandating the vaccine or something like that. I think we had a weak signal for those few seconds. So I just want to address that since you brought it up. The two components to that. One is, do we really want to give the government the right to enforce medicalization of healthy people? I think that's a question. I'm not going to pick a side on this. I'm just going to say that's a big deal, But the other thing is the vaccine itself, is the vaccine safe and effective? That's going to be pretty hard to prove because they are already skipping, the animal studies. They've gone right from development to clinical trials. They haven't done any, they skipped, according to some news, the news I've seen, they skipped the animal trials. They're going to skip the little bit of safety that they do for these things. So I think everybody is aware of the fact, and this was just published in one of the Nature journals, I believe. Everyone's aware of the fact that the potential for this vaccine to get released onto the market without sufficient safety studies is huge. And so that's a concern. You know, if they were to make one that's safe and effective, yeah, people who want to use it should be able to use it. Just because something is safe and effective doesn't mean it should be forced on me, you know? Like carrots are safe and effective. Does that mean I have the right to force you to eat them? No.
I love that.
That was a good analogy. That was that could be my last analogy for the day.
With that analogy, we'll
Right.
call it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Vasquez. When are you coming to the States again?
Well, right now, the flights are blocked, so let's just leave it at that.
That's a good point. That's a good point. You know, we'll come back to that question when the storm passes.
Yeah. Very well.
Friend.
Okay. Nice chatting with you.
It's great chatting with you as well. And to all of y'all, thank you for sticking around.